welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm back at it with another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at this up-and-coming ingress of Mercury moving into the sign of Sagittarius. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, click the bell button below, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you guys give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and leave me a comment and let me know, do you have Mercury in Sagittarius or Mercury in the 9th house? I'd love to hear from you guys, and what are your thoughts on this particular Mercury transit? But essentially, when Mercury goes through the sign of Sagittarius, it's a quest for truth. That's essentially what we're going to be talking about today. Obviously, this is going to be a part 1 video because, as many of you guys know, at the end of November, we will see Mercury turn retrograde in Sagittarius, and that retrograde will take us clear into December. So this is just kind of like the first kind of look. And if you guys hang tight till the end of the video, I will be giving you some insight and talking about where this ingress is happening for each and every one of the 12 rising signs. But essentially, Mercury is the planet of communication. So when Mercury changes signs, the way that we communicate, what our mind is kind of thinking about, what business or conversations are kind of, focusing on, it's going to be brought up through that particular sign. So with all transits, there's always pros and cons. So I really want to focus on, given that this is in a Jupiterian sign, it's Sagittarius, I want to focus on the positive. So for starters, we're going to see Mercury in the sign of Sag from about November the 2nd through January the 8th, 2025. Now that sounds like a pretty long time, right? We're going to be experiencing this for just a little over 2 months, and that's because of Mercury's retrograde. So it's going to extend the period that we're going to have Mercury in this sign. So if you happen to be a Mercury ruled chart, if you are a Gemini or a Virgo rising, this is going to impact you a little bit more, as your chart ruler is going to be spending an extended period of time in a certain area of your chart. Equally for Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and risings. You guys are going to be feeling this as well. It's pretty personal for you. And I guess the positive is that, Mercury going through this sign almost becomes like an eternal student or philosopher. So there is much more focus when it comes to communication that is infused with optimism, exploration, and obviously a quest for truth, because this is a sign that's associated with Jupiter. It's also a fire sign, so this is a little bit more active, dynamic, adventurous, and we see lots of opportunities maybe to take risks and chances while Mercury goes through this sign. So for its strengths, it's definitely a time for higher learning, great for travel generally. It can be good for philosophical discussions and conversations, and you might feel compelled to explore new ideas, as well as culture, or take up new educational pursuits, because Sagittarius is associated with all these topics. However, there are some challenges with Mercury in this sign. Technically, Mercury is in its fall. This means that it's in the opposite sign of where it's typically in its domicile or at home, Gemini. So when you put Mercury into a Jupiterian sign, right, it's going to make things bigger. Communication seems bigger. There can be a sense of there being potential communication breakdowns through overconfidence. Also, impatience can be a theme because it's in a fire sign. And sometimes, Mercury and Sag gets so focused on the bigger picture that it can have a hard time really focusing on the details, and it gets kind of caught up in the grand narrative. So I do think that in this particular kind of transit of Mercury, we are going to see these themes, because in the shadow, there's going to be so many aspects that are going to happen before Mercury even turns retrograde that, fortunately, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of the pros and cons, I think, of Mercury in this sign. Now, why does Mercury struggle in Sagittarius? I think for me, the biggest challenge here when I see this transit, just personally, is that I noticed that there is a lack of detail, right? Usually we like to see Mercury in Gemini or Virgo, where it can really get some work done. But when it's working through Sagittarius, it's very broad. So it has these sweeping perspectives. It can clash with Mercury's need for precision, and also it leads to misunderstandings. And we have a tendency to kind of gloss over important details, which I think we're likely to do anyway during a Mercury retrograde. As we kind of get into November, you guys are going to get to about the 6th. And then we are in the shadow. So you guys are going to be feeling the effects of that from the 6th of November on, even though we won't actually see the retrograde until the end of the month. Now, something else to kind of think about also during this particular transit is that, you know, we're gonna probably feel a little bit more impulsive. That's the feeling that I get. Because Sagittarius is all about freedom and adventure, and it really makes Mercury's unusual kind of like communication a little bit more impulsive. It's a little bit more scattered here as well, so be mindful of that. Now, throughout this particular transit, you guys know I like to take you through some of the hot zones and talk about the aspects that Mercury will be making. And there are going to be several, and you're going to see several of the aspects that I'm going to be bringing up happen several times because of the process of the Mercury retrograde, where it comes into the degrees where it's going to retrograde, then it's going to make the aspects, then it's going to go retrograde, then it's going to make the aspects again, go direct, make it a third time. So, you know, I'm of the frame of mind that's like, okay, Mercury retrogrades are actually positive. It gives us the opportunity to rework something or go back and kind of problem solve, or maybe, you know, recover something that we have lost, or maybe we go back and have, you know, a conversation with somebody, or we finish a project. And so I think that going into this, we can be a little bit more optimistic, right, about what we can achieve, where we can go, what we can do. And we can have a tendency, I think, to maybe with this one, bite off a little bit more than what we can chew. So as I've said to you guys in the November horoscopes, I'm going to say this again, like, be mindful that if you're trying to get all of your stuff done prior to the Mercury retrograde shadow on the 6th, there is still going to be a process of kind of reworking things. We're going to have to kind of take our time, watch some of the squares to planets in Pisces, watch the oppositions to Jupiter and Gemini, and we're just going to have to kind of see like where the chips fall. I have kind of gone back and forth with this, and I'm just kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to wait until the retrograde and let the retrograde play out. I'm not going to try to be too optimistic that I can kind of problem solve before some of the problems present themselves. That's just me, because I know that anything that I try to do prior to this is going to get reworked. So I'm in it with you guys. You guys will have to let me know what your thought process is on where Mercury is retrograding in your chart, and how you're feeling about navigating that. Probably for me, the first big aspect that really stands out to me is going to be let's take this one at a time. Here we go. Is going to be when Mercury comes into a trine with the North Node. Okay. So that's going to be right around November the 6th. Now, something to consider is Mars is also ingressing into Leo. So while Mars is moving into Leo, we have a 2-degree orb of like a trine between Mercury and Mars, where the mind is more optimistic and kind of open-minded about where we can go, what we can achieve, what we can do. And that's aligning with a trine to Mars, which is also in shadow. It's slowing down, where we're feeling more motivated, more creative. We're also feeling more willing to play and be kind of like open-hearted. So I like the trine actually right off the bat from Mars, and then also the North Node. But yeah, on November 6th, we see Mercury trine with the North Node. And even when Mercury retrogrades, Mercury's going to retrograde back to about 6 degrees. So the actual retrograde will be from about 22 of Sag to about 6 degrees of Sag. So when it stations, we will see it still slightly in a trine to the North Node. And the North Node in Aries is like getting on the path, destiny, like what the future holds, like what our plans are, what actions we're taking, how we're becoming more independent, how we're becoming more so brave and kind of like courageous. So this ongoing trine that we see, actually for a while, we're going to see this most of December, because Mercury will retrograde back and trine Mars again, and then Mars will be going retrograde, really highlights the Aries, Leo, Sagittarius area of your chart. And fire trines are about life. They're about creativity. They're about romance. They're about fun. It's about, you know, like initiating things and like kind of like seeing action. So you want to kind of take a look at which houses are the fire houses in your chart, because that's going to be something that's going to be pretty positive and fortuitous in the midst of what's going to be a Mars and a Mercury retrograde, and then a brewing, you know, Mars-Pluto opposition again, a brewing Jupiter-Saturn square again, And we got to kind of find like the positive aspects where we can in the midst of December. I feel like with Mercury trine the North Node, essentially kind of what comes up with this, I think, is that it gives us the opportunity to kind of tap into where we're supposed to be going, what our purpose is, what actions we can be taking. And I just encourage all of you guys to kind of be open to that. It's a great aspect right off the bat. That's going to be happening around the 5th, 6th, and 7th of November before we get into the next phase. So the next phase is then going to be where Mercury is going to come into shadow. So by the time we're in the 6th, 7th, this is where Mercury is going to start possibly showing the effects of the Mercury retrograde breakdown. Okay, so when I say that, it means that the area of Sagittarius in your chart may start experiencing some kind of like, you know, some challenges. You might start seeing the delays. You might start seeing the miscommunication. You might start seeing what's kind of like breaking down, because that's really what the retrograde is about. Up until the point where the sun conjuncts Mercury and then Mercury is reborn, then we have more information, we're more aware, we know how to kind of rework things. And so like, for example, like for me, you know, I'm a Libra rising, and whenever I see this Mercury retrograde in my 3rd house, I'm like, I always experience so many delays when I'm traveling. I always find that I'm trying to come and go places and there's just like tons of construction. I know to leave a little bit early when I'm coming and going. You know, I know to be really careful about planning trips. I have seen the last 2 or 3 Mercury retrogrades, like a light or something go out in my car and then, you know, try to fix it or replace it. And then, you know, there's something wrong with it. I mean, literally the last time it happened, it was like, took it to the dealer to go and have like a plate underneath fixed, and then drove all the way home and then saw that it was dragging the entire time, and they had to physically come to me and fix it. The time before that, it was where a light kept coming on and off in my car. It finally went out and then had to figure out how to replace it. And it was like a whole process getting it replaced. So the reason why I create these videos is to let you guys know, like, hey, these things are gonna happen. This is the area of your life it's gonna happen. This is what you wanna watch for. So you can overcome some of the challenges. Just don't be entirely too optimistic. That's like, oh, we can swing it, it'll be fine. Because I feel like with the shadow period, even before we get to the retrograde, Mercury is going to make a number of aspects in the sky. It's going to come into a square with Saturn. Okay, so after the 6th and the 7th, when we're in the shadow, it's going to come into a square with Saturn here. And it looks like that's going to be happening like right around the 11th. Maybe it's going into the 12th. Okay, so on the 12th, then Mercury square Saturn is going to represent, all right, you know, there is some block, challenge, delay. There is some issues with clarity, right? We've got Saturn, which is like the taskmaster. It's about like long-term goals, responsibility, karma. It's at a 12, which means there is going to be some confusion, or there is going to be a sense of dealing with mental health related things, unexpected situations, disappearances, things that seem crazy, you know, but also I feel like Mercury retrogrades, even the shadow, it's about going internal. So it's going to be about really paying attention to our intuition, like what our intuition is telling us. And if we're feeling intuitively like, maybe we should take a second, really think about this before we make any moves or we make any plans. Obviously not a great aspect for communication, right? For signing contracts, for planning travel, for business agreements. I mean, Mercury is all about business. It's about transactions. It can be about data and information. It could be about vehicles. Specifically in Sagittarius, it's more connected to like international travel, airlines, things revolving around also court and legality. So let's say you're trying to catch a flight, or maybe you are trying to apply to a college or for courses or classes. Maybe you're trying to get a recommendation letter from a professor. Maybe you're trying to deal with like an immigration matter, right? I'm just throwing some ideas out there that would kind of correlate with Sag. These are, this is a day where things aren't necessarily going to work well. So we want to be mindful that, first Mercury comes into Sag, it's going to trine Mars. So we're feeling motivated. It's going to trine the North Node, and we're kind of feeling like, okay, I can take action. And then around the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, we get checked. And Mercury square Saturn is going to create some issues in communication. You know, Sagittarius is like right between the eyes. It's blunt, it's direct, it's about the truth. Saturn in Pisces, retrograde. This is about like not wanting to take responsibility, not knowing how, potentially struggling when it comes to clarity or our emotions or anything revolving around fear of, you know, releasing something or letting something go. So I feel like communication just in general with this Mercury retrograde feels absolutely Looney Tunes, because we're going to see so many squares and oppositions taking place with mutable signs that everything is distorted. Jupiter distorts things, right? When it's in, because of its connection with Pisces. Neptune distorts things. I guess I should say Jupiter makes things bigger. Neptune is more the distortion. You know, Jupiter is going to make things bigger. So you're going to see first the square. Okay, so that's not a good day for communication, travel, planning, you know, trips, anything like that. And then you're going to see, you know, with this aspect, serious discussions, okay? And also like serious topics revolving around philosophical or legal matters. That's something else you want to keep in mind. The key here with Mercury square Saturn is that because, you know, communication is going to feel heavy or blocked, it's really urging us to practice patience and perhaps this, like, have a deeper, much more reflective approach to learning or communication, not focusing on having the conversation, reflecting on like what's not working and just taking a second. All right, so then the next big aspect we're going to see will be Jupiter coming into an opposition with Mercury. And it looks like that's gonna kind of get triggered a little bit on the 17th because the moon is gonna be there. But it'll pretty much be all day, but you'll start to see it especially early in the morning. Okay, so here's something else that's really interesting that I've thought about this retrograde. We've got Mercury in its fall, and it's in a Jupiterian sign. We've got Jupiter in its fall, it's in a Mercurial sign, and they oppose each other. So even if they didn't make an aspect to one another, which they are, they're making the opposition where opposites attract, or maybe they're saying the same thing. They have mutual reception, right? So it's like Mercury can be making conversation so much bigger in Sagittarius. Jupiter could be making, you know, conversation in media so much bigger when it's in Gemini. And I feel like for me that what keeps coming up is like lost in translation, right? That opposition between, you know, planets in a sign that deals with language, media, learning, short distance travel, and Sagittarius, culture, philosophy, higher mind, you know, other countries, other places. And then also simultaneously the brewing squares between Saturn and Neptune. I feel like this Mercury, you know, transit in Sagittarius, like, and I've said in previous videos, I'm waiting to see what some of the brightest minds have to say over the next couple of weeks, especially people who specialize in law, written law, right? And also maybe like history. I think there's going to be a lot of like reflecting on what's happened historically when it comes to, you know, major elections and like decisions. Also anything revolving around like, you know, law, like the courts and like decisions that are somehow kind of connected to the rule of law and what people have to say and like their input on, you know, our elections process. I mean, I think a lot of it's going to be connected to that. And then obviously the impact that that's going to have on the media, right? Because Gemini can very much be the media. But when you have Mercury in opposition to Jupiter, just in general, that's going to make for big news. And it's going to be like that big surprising news that comes out, you know, from somebody that you don't see coming. It could be that there is some positive kind of interaction with somebody outside of you that like kind of opens up your mind and brightens up your mind. But it can also be tall tales, right? Especially Mercury and Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is known for being taller, tall tales. And so this is going to make whatever news is brewing on like the 17th and the 18th very big. And the opposition is going to be happening at an 18 degree. So this is going to be obviously about employees, workers, you know, workmen, hospitality, the travel industry, I think the business of travel, because it's a Virgo degree at 18 degrees. And it could also just be really triggering a lot of like mental health issues, to be honest with you. You know, Mercury can be about our mental faculties. And when it's in its fall in opposition to Jupiter in its fall, square Saturn and Neptune, like I think we could have some people who are just kind of like their mind is spinning with just information overload, and people are feeling like very overwhelmed with the news cycles and the things that are coming out, and the fact that we're in the shadow and we can't really see fact from fiction. So, you know, it's a very complex kind of configuration. Now, I think I see like Mercury in opposition to Jupiter here as like a clash of ideas. And it's really over optimism or exaggerated promises that can lead to misunderstandings or commitments that we might regret. So it's all about balancing like our enthusiasm with practicality and communication and education or travel plans, and like not being too overly optimistic. And I've said this in previous videos. I've told a lot of people, you know, traveling under these transits, kind of like the end of November, like Thanksgiving through December and the holidays, you're really taking a gamble, right? Especially for certain charts. If this happens to be happening in like your 3rd, 6th, 9th, or 12th houses, this can definitely be a time where that's very much impacted more than other people. I do feel like the key here is, you know, also just being realistic, and like, I kind of look at whatever's happening mid-November into December as like, we're not really going to know the truth about a lot of things. We're waiting for other people to give their input. We are not trying to be, you know, like, I guess like hopelessly like optimistic, trying to be more realistic, because some things are going to sound, you know, too good to be true. And I would encourage you guys to just use like a sense of, you know, groundedness and awareness about some of these aspects, because you might be hearing some things that you're just like, wow, that's amazing. And we find out that it's just like, it's not factual. Now, I take that into consideration as well, because, you know, the retrograde will be between 6 and 22 degrees. So while Mercury is at that 6 degrees, it's squaring Saturn, where there is a need to be a little bit more sober-minded. But when it gets all the way up to like, you know, 22 degrees, it's starting to come into a square with Neptune. So where Saturn is like needing to be a little bit more cautious, Neptune is like, oh, we're going to distort things. We're going to make it sound this way. And it could be distortion of media. It could be distortion of video. It could be distortion of things that you see on television. Screens is Pisces. I think it's likely we'll see something throughout this transit where there is going to be input that's going to be coming from international like leaders or international media. And some of the media may be distorted, or it might be chopped up, or it might be falsely represented or falsely translated. Because Mercury is going to deal with language, especially in the opposition to Jupiter and the dispositorship that's going on between the two square Saturn. There may be some news articles or newscasts that are coming out in your country that is going to be completely different of that in another country. And you're going to see other countries talking about what's going on with the United States election. You're going to see other countries talking about what's going on with world politics. You're going to see other countries talking about what's going on with religious groups or with international decisions or laws that are being passed, especially with the squares to Saturn and Neptune. You're going to hear things like accountability for disruption of borders, accountability for medical malpractice or involvement in falsifying anything revolving around pharmaceuticals. These things are happening. You're just not always hearing about it on the mainstream news. But I feel like, you know, as an American, the only way for me to get balanced news is to get outside of my bubble and like see what else is going on outside of the world, and not always seek my information through American kind of like sources. And I love independent media. I've said for a long time that I felt like a lot of Jupiter and Gemini was going to be about this, and the North Node in Aries. But you may be missing out on some really big stories throughout this cycle. So kind of keep an open mind about different perspectives of what might be coming from other places. And like keep in mind that if you're reading subtitles or if you're reading any translations, there can definitely be things that can be falsely represented or kind of chopped up a little bit. Obviously, Mercury square Neptune is a little tricky because this leads to like confusion, and there's illusions, there's blurring between the lines of like fantasy and reality and communications. There can be falsehoods, there can be white lies that can be told here. And because both Neptune and Saturn are playing off of Jupiter, Jupiter rules Pisces traditionally, and Jupiter is also playing off of Mercury, a lot of the challenges in terms of like information that's being put out or what's being kind of like changed or manipulated is likely going to be coming from media, I believe, more than anything else. That's just my hot take. And also it adds that layer of like confusion. Mercury square Neptune is like, I can't think straight, you know, or the mind is altered, or we're too tired, or maybe there is something that is kind of stressful and we just kind of like want to rest, or, you know, sometimes there is a tendency to want a mental break. And people are going to be more inclined to be like, I just want to escape from this, right? Mercury and Sag. I just want to get on a plane and go somewhere. I don't want to be here. You know, this is too much for me to deal with. Or be more inclined to like indulge in like substances and like substance abuse. So be mindful that that's in the air as well. You know, be cautious of deception, or being overly idealistic. I think it's really the whole Mercury retrograde, because Saturn and Neptune are the focal points of this square, this T-square between Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturn, Neptune, is that it's about grounded communication and really avoiding promises we can't keep, right? And also, if something's meant to become disclosed, if something needs to come out, if we need to see what's going on in the shadows, or in, you know, what's been hidden or what's been swept under the rug, we're gonna see that, right? We had an eclipse in Pisces. We had that in mid-September, and that was like right around 25 degrees of Pisces. So Mercury will get right up to about 22, so it's starting to kind of square that eclipse point, and you guys will see basically, you know, throughout the Sagittarius season, not just because the Mercury retrograde, but when planets hit these degrees and then they start squaring, you know, 24, 25, 26 of Pisces, we see further unfoldment of some of the things that have been brewing since that Pisces eclipse. And Sagittarius, you know, yes, it deals with culture, it deals with philosophy, it does deal with the higher mind and colleges and professors and, you know, legal matters. But the squares to Pisces can be about religious matters, spiritual matters. It can also be about you know, people who are in need, who are, you know, lost. You know, Neptune presiding over Pisces is about those who are lost. So it can be homeless groups of people. It can also be people who are, you know, devastated from the recent storms and the flooding. People who are also in need of medical care, mental health care, issues with addiction. Things pertaining to the rule of law and connection to, you know, borders and you know, people who are immigrating, and like that stuff can be coming up in a very big way as well. So you'll see some of these topics that will kind of come up through the retrograde. I will do another separate video on that. I would just say that as a part one, know that there is so many aspects in the pre-shadow. So you will see Mercury get up to about 22 degrees, and then it's going to turn retrograde. Okay, so it looks like that retrograde is going to start. Come on. Taking its time. Sorry, guys. There you go. So it's going to start like right around the 25th of November. Yeah, in the PM hours. So if you have any personal planets, I would say like 23 to about 5 degrees of Sagittarius. Just a heads up, you're going to, you know, be feeling the effects of the Mercury retrograde. Same thing for the mutable signs. So for Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces, you're going to be feeling this as well. Especially Virgo, because you're like the missing piece of the puzzle for like what will probably be a grand mutable cross for a lot of you guys. And you're going to want to, you know, recognize that throughout these transits, you will then see this happen again, right? So Mercury turns retrograde at the end of November. And then what you're going to see is it will come into an opposition with Jupiter right here, right after the new moon. Okay, so that looks like that's going to be happening like right around the 4th of December. All right, right here. So that's a similar aspect of what we saw right off the bat at the beginning of the Mercury kind of shadow that was taking place after the 6th. So I think that was like the 11th and the 12th of November. And that's going to bring up the big communication. Then we're going to see the Mercury Cazimi right here. And I'll talk about that in the Mercury retrograde. Then we're going to see Mercury square Saturn again. Okay, so that's the blocks and issues with communication. and then we're going to see Mercury go back to 6 degrees where it's going to station, go direct in mid-December. And then it will go through these aspects again. All right, so it'll square Saturn again. Looks like that's going to be like right around the 26th and the 27th of December. Simultaneously, while Jupiter is squaring Saturn. So that's going to be a Jupiter-Mercury opposition square Saturn. And if you guys have been following along, the Saturn-Jupiter square that took place in August, where there was some kind of like tension between expansion and contraction, we'll see the second one happen with Mercury. Right? So it's not just Mercury square Saturn, it's going to be Mercury opposed Jupiter, Jupiter square Saturn. So see what I'm saying where I'm like, oh, Saturn is like this focal point, you know, over and over and over. And Saturn in Pisces for a lot of us is about getting in touch with our intuition. It's about learning to make peace with letting things go, feeling our way into stuff emotionally, consciously dissolving things, being more sympathetic, understanding, being compassionate, you know, focusing on our kind of like spiritual groundedness. And for a lot of us, it's just like taking time alone or, you know, being in nature, going for a walk or meditating. But man, Saturn seems to be really, really prominent. Then we're going to see it come back into 22-ish degrees. So it's coming out of shadow right around the beginning of the new year. So, you know, when we get into January of 2025, Mercury's leaving shadow, so that's good. But then it's going to come into, finally, by exact terms, a square with Neptune, and that's going to be on the 6th of January. So it really won't be until about like the 7th, 8th. I would even say like Mercury and Capricorn. I feel like when Mercury's in Capricorn, things are going to be a lot more solid. It looks like with that transit around the 8th, the moon will trine Mercury, and Mercury will be in a Saturn-based sign. And we're going to have quite a bit of sextiles between Capricorn and also Pisces. So I feel like things will be a little bit more stable then. So we will do a Mercury retrograde video. Don't worry about that. I would just say, you know, in preparation, as you guys are watching this now, you know, like I said in my horoscopes, get your guys' Mercury retrograde stuff done, you know, if you can, prior to the 6th. November 1st and 2nd are excellent communication days. They're really great. We see aspects happening between Mercury and Scorpio and Pluto and Capricorn, as well as Neptune in Pisces, taking a much more kind of like intuitive approach to making some big decisions. Or you can kind of roll the dice and take a chance, and you can decide that you can work through some of this stuff over the next month, really hone in on where Saturn is in Pisces, not just the Mercury retrograde, because Saturn is going to be kind of like the hurdle that you're going to have to jump throughout this retrograde period. Recently, somebody said in one of the comments, they were like, what is your Mercury retrograde or your Mercury stuff? Okay, so first of all, Mercury rules gadgets. So I like to tell people to back up their data, okay? So before you get into the shadow, if you need to back up your computer, if you need to back up, you know, to your iCloud, if you need to save important or sensitive data or information, do that, especially because I feel like travel and technology are possibly going to be misaligned. Okay, so we want to make sure that we have our devices backed up. Do you have your digital calendars backed up? You know, that's something that I would do. Do you know that you've confirmed your appointments through the end of the year? That's something I would do. And also, I think this is like updating or making the necessary updates that you need for some of your devices. I would do that. I would also review plans. So obviously look at the house that, you know, that Mercury is going retrograde in Sagittarius, but reevaluate travel plans, okay? I told everybody, like, refundable tickets, plan B, triple check all of your reservations. You know, sometimes it can be also important to make sure you like put bags on all of your luggage, make sure that if you're traveling somewhere that you're not familiar with, you know how to get around, you double check your reservations, you make sure that you have your hotel, you make sure you have your rental car, and anything else that's associated with Sag. So I would feel like, you know, people are going to really benefit from having translation devices with this retrograde, especially if you're going to be traveling internationally. Currency exchange might be something else that can be really helpful, so you're not kind of like confused and getting shorted if you're, you know, converting your currency, knowing what it's worth and like the up-to-date numbers. Really taking your time when it comes also to educational pursuits. So I could see some people who might be going and traveling and visiting campuses that they would potentially want to go to next year. I could also see some people who are having a little back and forth, maybe having trouble, with counselors, with mentors. It could be also with like educational programs, or like even dealing with college professors. If you're somebody who's like, I want to launch my book, I want to launch my course, I want to do this, I would be like, maybe wait. This is a time where you're refining everything. Now, if you're saying, hey, I want to go back to school, you start looking at where you would want to go and you start doing the research. If you're saying, hey, I want to eventually write a book, I would say, great, sit down and start doing the outline and getting everything, going and like working on it during the retrograde. You guys can do things during the retrograde. Retrogrades are more internal. So I think it's a good time to turn inward and do some of that work. But you guys will probably hit some snags with some of the squares to Saturn and Neptune. So just be mindful of that. With retrogrades, I also think it's important to reconnect. So reconnect with philosophies or cultures that you've previously explored. Some of you guys might reconnect with friends at a distance. Some of you guys might return to finishing a project that you have not completed, or going back to school. You might return to visit a place that you have been before. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I would just say that, we tend to have some hiccups that can happen during a retrograde. And I feel like, the end of 2024 going into the beginning of 2025, to me, it doesn't really feel like the new year is going to start until the spring. When we're getting into like April and May, when, the eclipses have happened, the retrogrades are over, like we're going to start to feel like things are moving forward. But really the next 2 months is a lot of reviewing. What are we done with? What's not working, right? Where are we kind of hitting a wall? And then we will spend the first 2 or 3 months of 2025 reworking all of that stuff before things really move forward in the spring of next year. So move with this energy. Try to be optimistic about some of the changes that you guys are making. Watch for your blind spots. Obviously, stay grounded. So even though you're going to be exploring new horizons, keep your feet on the ground. It's really easy to kind of get super overly interested or enticed or kind of involved in one thing, and then find that we're just doing too much at one time. So watch, this is not the best time for multitasking. We want to, balance our interests and our optimism with practicality. We also want to communicate clearly. So I would say with Mercury and Sagittarius, like avoid overgeneralizations. That's something that has the tendency to happen. Make your points with clarity, especially during aspects, around the retrograde. That's where you're going to see some of the biggest challenges. And embrace learning. So I would use this time to embrace your mind. Just ensure that, what you're learning is grounded in fact, and that you have like an adequate teacher or course or program, or author or YouTube channel, that you trust that you're going to be getting your information from. So I hope that's helpful. Like I said, that's the part 1. I would like to take you guys through the Mercury in Sagittarius for the 12 rising signs, so you guys can see what that looks like. And as a reminder, I am a Western astrologer, so I practice Western astrology. I am not Vedic. And this is going to be for the 12 rising signs. So what you want to do is you want to listen to your rising or your ascendant sign. That's going to tell you which house exactly Mercury is ingressing into, and also, a place that you kind of want to just be aware of that's going to be under construction for like the next 2 months. And it'll give you a little bit more insight where some of the action is going to be taking place and what you're kind of reworking, right? So Gemini, Virgo, risings, I'm talking to you guys, your chart rulers on the move. Sag, we talked about this a little bit in your horoscope, but this is going to be very personal for you, and obviously 5 to about 23 degrees of the mutable signs. All right. So for Aries and Aries rising, okay, so you're going to have this Mercury transit in the sign of Sagittarius taking place in your natal 9th house. So it's a fellow sister fire sign. I think everybody's going to benefit from the fire trines, but I think you especially are really going to like this one, like in a very big way. And I feel like this is important because this is all about like creativity, channels into philosophical or educational projects like are going to come up. So I don't know if this means that you're going to go, okay, well, I'm making more time to, potentially go back to school, or I'm making time to travel more, or I'm making time to, learn something new. You've got your third house ruler and your sixth house ruler in the ninth, right? So what you're going to see here is that this is really amplifying your need for like travel and also education. Just be mindful of overcommitting yourself. You could be overcommitting yourself in some way. Now, this will be obviously trying your personal planets in Aries and also your chart ruler in the fifth house. So maybe you're feeling incentivized or excited to go on a holiday. Maybe there's something opening up in regards to like education and children, or holidays with a romantic partner. Maybe this is just about you picking up a book or getting involved in a program or something that's going to expand your mind and help you learn more. Just watch. The hang up is the fact that your health and kind of routine rulership makes me feel like there can be some scheduling changes. There can be some changes going on also with training, if you're doing some kind of training. Mercury square Saturn tells me that a lot of the changes that you see coming will come out of the blue. You're not going to see them coming. You're not going to know where they're coming from. And to work with that Saturn square, I think a lot of Aries and Aries risings would really benefit from maybe learning about a place before they travel there, doing some research. Maybe it's going to be about learning more about esoteric or kind of spiritual or metaphysical topics. This could be about meditation. This could also be about anything connected to like hypnotherapy with Saturn in Pisces, to kind of help calm the mind. And if you're looking for a new teacher, mentor, or program, this would be a good time to get looking. I just think that you're going to really take your time and make sure that it's going to work with your schedule, that it's going to be something that you really feel like is in alignment with what it is you want to do. Okay. The card that I get is the King of Coins, or Pentacles. So keep an eye out for a Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. Although I do feel like this is about you going like, I want to really feel solid in my decision. For some of you guys, it could be that you're wanting to make a change in your education to better your career, right? Because Saturn is connected to your career. It's your 10th house lord. For others, it can mean that, you're hoping to bring somebody solid in that could teach you, that could help you when it comes to finances, resources, right? Pentacles can be about money. But this could also mean that you're wanting to get kind of like a firmer, solid kind of groundedness to your beliefs. And maybe you're learning about health or herbalism or crystals or, like earthly things. It could be finances. It could be something relating to investments. It could be something relating to money. And what else? And yeah, maybe some kind of skill, because Mercury could be skill. So you're wanting to learn a new skill of some kind. Okay. Good luck, Aries. I hope that's helpful. We have got Taurus and Taurus rising. You guys will be experiencing Mercury's transit into the sign of Sagittarius, and it will be going into your natal 8th house. So for you, Taurus and Taurus rising, the 8th house is the kind of like the shadow self. It is something that's more hidden. It's representing a transformation of your mind. Mercury deals with your 5th house, which can be about creativity, self-expression, and children. It's also connected to your 2nd house of resources and personal possessions. So for you, Taurus, this is about like having deep conversations with other people. And I don't know if it's going to be about your values, if it's about your resources, if it's going to be about what's, kind of on your heart. It can also be where you're going back and forth with another person about money or investments, especially as they pertain to children, because Mercury rules your 5th house. It can be a period of like having more depth when it comes to talking about what you're afraid of, or like intimacy and relationships. So I do feel like there can be an opportunity to go deeper with partners and experience like more emotion and vulnerability. And I really feel like this is also about financial agreements that you're needing to review. Now, it is in a sign that is in conjunct or quincunx you. So keep in mind that like Sagittarius and Taurus, they don't always like see eye to eye. Like, Taurus is a little bit more cautious and reserved, and Sagittarius has a tendency to be like bigger and kind of grander. And with the retrograde coming through your 8th, it is possible that there is something changing about your partner's finances or resources. Usually with retrograde, something can go away or it can come back. So it is likely with the oppositions to your second house that there is some kind of exchange going on with like you and another person. If you are waiting for like a refund or somebody to pay you back for something, the retrograde could end up bringing that forward for you. But also there can be some back and forth you're having with another person about money and joint assets and like wanting to put money together or wanting to be more generous with another person. So there can be something changing if you're in a committed relationship with your partner's resources, and there can be a sense of merging and trying to kind of bring more in together, okay? The card that I get for you is the King of Cups. So watch for Scorpios, Cancers, or Pisces, all right, Taurus. King of Cups talks about like emotion. So I feel like this is more about learning to kind of talk about how you're feeling, what's on your heart, what's on your mind. This can also be about mastering your emotions and finding ways to talk about things in a very vulnerable way, and also like getting down to like matters of the heart, which is very much, I think, the connection to the 5th house rulership in your 8th. The 8th is heavy stuff though, right? So like it can be like, getting back into therapy. It can be talking about grief. It can be talking about loss, or, like just really being vulnerable and like opening up to people. So the King of Cups can be about learning to kind of exercise that emotional maturity, but it can also be about talking to somebody who can really help hold space for you if you feel like you need to talk about some sensitive topics. Good luck. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising, your guys' favorite time of the year, Mercury retrograde. And this is like one hell of a Mercury retrograde for you guys. So Mercury is going into Sagittarius, right? So it's going to go into your 7th house. So wherever Mercury is like where you are. So Mercury in the 7th means that you want to be a little bit more active when it comes to relationships. And there is this sense of like relationships becoming about exchange of ideas and like talking about the future and like what is possible and being really, kind of optimistic about that. If you're in a relationship, there's more, kind of communicating with the person you're committed to, or with your clients, or maybe with your business partnership. If you're single, it's a time where, because Mercury retrogrades are very karmic, because we're dealing with the past, you could be getting closure in a past relationship. You could be making a decision that you want to walk away from something. It could be a time where somebody from the past comes back, or where if somebody's meant to walk into your life, they might. Mercury is also connected to your 4th house of home and family. So, as Mercury goes through Sagittarius, something you want to keep in mind is that it will oppose Jupiter in your sign. So this can be about a relationship at a distance. This can be about a back and forth where you and your partner are both saying the same thing, but there is a sense of not really understanding where each other are coming from. And it's going to ricochet off of Saturn and Neptune. So I see a lot of this about being like, where are we going together? What are we doing? And whether this is in romantic relationship and business partnership, it can be about you're reevaluating some kind of work maybe that you're doing with a company or like with an employer, and you're trying to decide whether or not it's a good match for you. And it can also be a time where, there's a need to just be more in tune with what's going on with other people, as it, kind of comes into kind of friction with your responsibility for your career or your work out in the world. I do feel like this can be also like discussing or handling family matters. So whether this is like talking to roommates about issues, talking to family members about issues, going back and forth with a partner about whether or not, you're going to make a home change, that can be coming up as well. So in your 7th house, keep in mind that there is going to be more communication with others. There may be some stuff that can come up revolving around legal partnerships and, dealing with legal partnerships and like really needing to be careful about communication. Because when Mercury turns retrograde, you will pull out of something. So you might be like, okay, well, if this relationship's not working, I'm out. Or, I'm no longer working with this client, or I don't like working, with this business partner, or I want to change my therapist. Something like that could potentially change as a result of the retrograde, inevitably down the road. I think I would say this to Gemini, and I think I would probably say this to maybe 1 or 2 other signs, but you're one of them. Like Mercury retrograde in the 7th, you can definitely hear from somebody from the past. And just because people come back doesn't mean you have to take them back. And I think the squares to Saturn are really implying that whoever you're kind of dealing with or going back and forth with, you want to make sure that you're making decisions relationship-wise that are going to be good for your future career, your reputation. Those are the squares to Saturn. So you might be also like talking to your therapist about work issues, or talking to your committed relationships about challenges that you're having with a work situation as well, and like kind of getting feedback from them. Okay. The card that I got for you is the Queen of Coins. So watch for possibly a Taurus or a Virgo or a Capricorn. Or this can just be you really reevaluating like how much stock and how much you're investing with relationship to other people. For you, this could also mean that you're getting more so grounded in relationships, right? Like a new moon there, you've got your 7th house ruler in the 1st house. I mean, for a lot of you guys, it could be about getting more serious and committed in terms of people that you're in relationship with or working with. Partnering with a significant person who could really benefit you or help you financially. That could be something else that could happen as well. Okay? Good luck, Gemini. We've got Cancer and Cancer rising. You'll be experiencing Mercury's transit through Sagittarius in your natal 6th house. And for you guys, this is going to be a place, number one, that Mercury does well in. It likes being in the 6th house because it can kind of focus on health and organization and productivity. Mercury is connected to your 3rd house of the mind, and this is also kind of getting around transportation, siblings, and learning, and the 12th house of the subconscious, what's hidden and also behind the scenes. So when you have your 12th house ruler in the 6th house, like if there's been some brewing mental health issues or health related issues, like it can become more obvious, and like it will come up so you can do something about it, just so you're aware. Equally, if you've had some like hidden enemies or some hidden blockages or things coming up, it can kind of present itself to you now. Now, Mercury going through Sagittarius in the 6th house, I think this is going to be about like, work routines and health. It might involve expanding in some way. So that could be expanding your office, expanding your schedule, doing some kind of training. Maybe you're having to travel for work. I would just say be careful and cautious of over-compromising or ignoring details. And, part of this is because of the retrograde, but also the squares to Saturn. And so the squares to Saturn could indicate, you need training to expand your career. You need to travel to maintain your career. Maybe you're working with a mentor, or you're going back to school. So like the retrograde can be about a change in your schedule, so you can ensure that you can do some kind of training or schooling. Anyway, there can be conflict with teachers, professors, relationships even, because Saturn is connected to your 7th house. So be mindful that there's going to be like a back and forth, and it's going to make you kind of go like, man, like, is this worth it? What am I learning about changing my job or changing my health habits? And I think there could be a lot of scheduling changes for you guys, especially when it comes to travel. Okay. So wow, lots of trump cards we're getting. So we've got the King of Wands. So watch for a Leo, a Sag, or an Aries. And I think that this is just about being bold. Like, I think of like Cancer and Cancer risings. Like if you guys are really ready to switch up your schedule, start a new position, launch a new business, take a new job, move to a new office space, anything like that. Like this is that preparation time, I think, before inevitably you may do that. And King of Wands could just be about being more physically active, making more time for creativity, making more time for playtime and kind of like self-expression. And optimism, and being a little bit more kind of open-minded about what the future holds when it comes to upgrades that can be made in your everyday routine, your work, or even in your health. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful, Cancer. We've got Leo and Leo rising. You guys are going to experience Mercury's transit through Sagittarius in your natal 5th house. I like this for you. I feel like I've said, everybody benefits from the fire trines, but Mercury in your 5th house, where you can really speak from the heart and focus on creativity and self-expression and joy, and the trine to Mars in your 1st house makes me feel like you're incredibly bold and very open-minded and like very excited to see some kind of change. Mercury is connected to your personal money and resources, as well as your 11th house of friends and goals. So I kind of see like the Mercury retrograde in the 5th house is like reworking something about, your value system. And if you have a creative business, revamping it, or putting more time or energy into it, or maybe changing something in regards to, how you are promoting yourself, or your personal branding could change. I also feel like this is about going back to 5th house matters. If you have creative projects you haven't finished, you may go back. This could be about reconnecting with old romantic partners, reconnecting with creative collaborators, you name it. So I like Mercury in this house. I feel like something to think about is that this is about really kind of channeling your creativity into something that could be like an educational project. It could be more philosophical. Yes, romance can get very adventurous here with Mercury in the 5th house. There can be a sense of being a little bit more optimistic about romantic endeavors, and maybe you're investing a little bit more time into it. Can people from the past come back because this will inevitably go retrograde? Yes, that can happen. And the opposition to Jupiter and the square to Saturn seems to be a big focal point, and that could be like where changes that are going on with children are impacting your joint finances or your social life, right? Or where maybe you're focusing more on your own happiness and your own creativity, and like you're spending time away from friends, or you're taking up like a new hobby. This is also about getting in touch with what's going to make you happy. And if you have felt like you have been disconnected from certain friends, now you can kind of reconnect, and you can do it in a way where, you can do something creative and collaborative with others. But I like it in the 5th house because I feel like that's just a house that you're most kind of comfortable with, being a Leo sun, moon, or rising. All right. The card that I got for you is the Chariot. So the Chariot can be seen or kind of associated with Cancer. So it can be referencing the new moon that we're going to have in Sagittarius that we will have. I'm not sure what date it is, but I'll grab it. But I do think that this is also about like what direction you're going in, and like letting your intuition guide you. It can also be about changes with the home or the family. This can be implying that there is some kind of instinct that's kind of coming up for you that you're needing to follow. And I think like with Mercury's connection to the 2nd, it's going to be you being like, I'm going to instinctually, know when to take a chance, like when to invest in something, when to really nurture something, when to go after something. And it can be implying that there's opportunity for travel or like vacations or relocations. That can definitely come up with the Chariot card as well. And obviously, Mercury retrograde in your 5th, Venus in your 5th, the Sun Mercury conjunction in your 5th may materialize as like kind of betting on yourself in a very big way. I think a lot of you will see that. That can also be major changes revolving around children. So it can also talk about pregnancy for some Leo and Leo risings. Good luck. We've got Virgo and Virgo rising. Virgo, I look at this for you and I'm like, oh my goodness, strap in. This is gonna be a bit of a ride. So you're gonna have Mercury going through Sagittarius, and this is your chart ruler, obviously. So Mercury is gonna go into your 4th house, where there's much more emphasis on like family discussions. It might also be about positive expansion that could be happening in the home or the family. There could be changes in your home that could happen due to travel or study. It could also be indicating with the incoming Mercury retrograde, you might be going back home. You might be moving. You might be changing something about your interior. Something is going to be shifting there. And that the change coming with home is either brought by you or a change in like a work situation. And so like I said, this Mercury transit, it is optimistic, but it's going to run into some trouble with some squares to Saturn and also with some squares to Neptune. So this means that whatever is getting reworked or kind of configured at home, it's running into some challenges in how it communicates or how you're communicating with romantic partners, committed relationships, clients, one-on-one relationships. It's squaring Saturn, so it means that there could be some challenges in communicating with people at home, and then it squares Neptune, which means that there can be a sense of like not gaining clarity, and it'll also oppose Jupiter. So it almost to me feels like there is some change or reworking with your private life or your home, which is going to be brought on by changes at work and also therefore impact you and your partnership. Now, if you're single, It might mean that, okay, you're moving and then, it gives you an opportunity to kind of meet new people. It can also mean that, there's something changing in regards to a home or family matter, and you're kind of like needing to talk to like a real estate agent or somebody, and maybe you're trying to get property on, for sale, right? Like on the market. But because you have Virgo in your chart somewhere, if you're anywhere between like 6 and 23 degrees, you're going to have this grand mutable square. So something needs to be reworked emotionally or in regards to the home or the family to kind of better relate to others and also navigate what's going on at work. All right. So the card that I get for you guys is the Three of Swords. Bummer. I feel like this is a card that's more like, you're kind of like, I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't. Like there are changes that that you need to make with this retrograde, and you're kind of like, nobody wins. It's like, okay, well, if I have to move, I'm having to move, and it's possibly kind of eating into my work time or, my relationship time. Or if a relationship is changing, that can be impacting where I'm living, and then also my status. And Three of Swords is about dealing with heartbreak and situations where there's been some disappointment, or you feel like there has been something that has really disappointed you in some significant way. The fourth house is the past. So if there's been something that you've needed to deal with for some time that's just been kind of like hanging around, and it's not unusual when you have a Mercury retrograde, like the past gets kind of kicked up. It's a good time to finally like put the kibosh on things where there's been long-standing issues in any of these areas, home, family, or relationship or work, and finally get through it. And this could be old patterns and habits that you have had as well that you could become a little bit more aware of, okay? Hopefully that's helpful. Let me know, Virgo. I'm curious to hear how this is playing out for you. We've got Libra and Libra rising. You'll experience Mercury going into Sagittarius in your natal third house. So good news, Libra, is that, Mercury likes being in the third house. It does well there because of its natural association, kind of like with Gemini. So there is more short distance trips, traveling, focusing on, if you have a blog or a YouTube channel, if you're writing, if you're taking a course, all that stuff kind of gets like activated. Mercury is connected to your 12th house of the subconscious and things that are hidden, and the 9th house of learning and anything revolving around like traveling, studying, kind of like your philosophy as well. So as Mercury goes through here, you may feel more inclined to be like, okay, I want to take a short course. There might be much more emphasis also on communication with siblings, with neighbors. You could be planning on moving. You could be maybe planning on making a change with a vehicle. But remember that Mercury will square Saturn, okay? And it will go retrograde. So with the square to Saturn and the opposition to Jupiter, it tells me that you are one of the signs where there is going to be some scheduling changes. There's going to be some changes going on where you're like, I have to travel, but traveling seems like a bit, challenging for some reason because your schedule is tight, because you have an issue with a pet, because you can't get work off, because you're having some health issues. And you're just going to have to kind of roll with the punches. It's not unusual when I see a retrograde in the third house that there can be issues with cars, or you're more prone to car accidents. But certainly with like the squares to Saturn, like it could also bring up needing to maintain vehicles, needing to deal with vehicles. Watch for misunderstandings with siblings or relatives. I feel like there could be some conversations you have with some people and you're just kind of like, man, this is like worth way more trouble than it was worth doing the back and forth with another person. Okay, but the positive is that you're interested in learning something. You're interested in traveling. Like there's some new book or some kind of new program that you're wanting to do or something you're wanting to learn. And I would just say, don't get overzealous. Take your time. You don't have to do it all at one time. Do something over a longer period of time and really think through traveling, especially if it's involving traveling long distances, whether it's like a long distance road trip or flying. There can be some hangups here. The card that I get is the Seven of Coins. So for you, Libra, I think this is about like you looking at your time and being like, what is going to be a better investment of time? And maybe, the third house is like going through there and you're thinking about, well, is there new gadgets? Is there new softwares? Are there new things that I could use that could be helping me like get my job done faster to be more productive? That's the square to Saturn. It could also represent where you're really thinking about where you're spending most of your time. And like maybe you're learning more about time management with the Mercury square Saturn, and you're trying to kind of find positive ways to like navigate either traveling, your health, productivity, something like that. And the Seven of Coins is also about getting work done. So know that, you know, Mercury and Venus, like they've been squaring Saturn and they're in a superior position. So it's like you might actually learn something new or download an app or bring in something that can really help you overcome some of these sixth house issues, health, wellness, productivity, routine, that can really make a really big difference in the future of your third house. I hope that's helpful for you, Libra. We've got Scorpio and Scorpio rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury's transit into Sagittarius in your natal second house. All right, Scorpio. Obviously, you know, with Mercury in your second house, you're focusing on values and earnings right now. Second house is your money. And you might be exploring a new investment opportunity. That's possible with Mercury in the second, because Mercury is connected to your eighth house, which is like investments, banking, bonds, you know, inheritance, other people's money. And the 11th house, which deals with goals and also, you know, your friends and networks and other people. This is generally wishes. So Mercury going into your second house, you're going to be more optimistic about money. You're going to be like, I have more to work with, or there is something that's kind of coming in that I know is going to be here, which I think is wonderful. I do feel like there can be also investments in like educational paths for financial gain. So you might be like paying a subscription to join a group to learn more about investment strategy. Perhaps maybe, you know, with Mercury going into your second house, the opposition to Jupiter is a lot of back and forth with another person. So Jupiter could be like a financial advisor. It could be a tax professional. It could be your committed relationship because this is joint finances. And the eighth house is about investments or money owed. And Jupiter is connected to your fifth house. So a lot of Scorpio and Scorpio risings are going to be like, okay, I'm cashing out on some investments I've made. I'm reallocating to some of these funds. I'm putting it into a savings, or I'm putting it into a high interest account. I'm putting it into another stock. And also financial stuff is going to be coming up revolving around either creative projects, self-employment, or children. And so it's interesting to watch like Mercury go through your second opposed Jupiter and square Saturn. Like it almost looks like you're going to say, well, I could be doing this with this money, but I'm going to do that. I could be spending it, but I'm going to pay my debt off. You know, I could be holding on to it, but I'm going to cash it out. Something like that's going to happen. And it looks like you're taking a much more cautious kind of conservative approach to this. Now, the second house is also about how you spend money. It's not just about, you know, like what you make, it's how you spend it. So when the retrograde happens, some of you guys are going to be really watching your budget more. Your personal style might change. That's something else to think about. And you may also be really focusing on like self-esteem stuff and like focusing on building yourself up. That's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle. Okay. So let's see what the cards say for you. Scorpio, I get the Hierophant, which can be connected to Taurus. That's your seventh house. But the Hierophant I also see is kind of like that like Saturn energy that you're going through. It's kind of like, you know, like maturing in some way, or like making much more mature, like long-term decisions and like figuring out what's most valuable to you. I think you guys have heard me say before, when you have planets go through the second house and it squares Saturn in the fifth house, there are some things that you're like, oh, there are some things money can't buy, right? Happiness-wise, or there are some things that are more valuable than money. And like that can be something that comes up, I think, with this card, where there's like a lot of like thinking about like where your values lie and like where you're going to be investing yourself in the long term, and just like a lot of like maturing revolving around finances and yeah, overall like sense of like confidence in what you're able to kind of produce. So the Hierophant can be helping you with that. This can also bring somebody in that can give you more insight in how to kind of set things up financially if you're wanting to set something up for like some kind of future plan. So if you have like an investment, or if you're wanting to like start like a savings account of some kind, that can be something that can come in and help you as well. All right, so let's go on to Sag and Sag rising. You and Virgo, man. May the force be with you guys. Well, Mercury's going into your sign, so that's not a bad transit. So for Sag and Sag rising, this is putting your seventh house ruler in the first, which means it's making you communicate with other people. So this could be great for like making announcements, trying to meet romantic partners, spending time with significant others. making big business announcements, as Mercury is also connected to your 10th. So a lot of it can be about status changes in regards to your, kind of professional opinion. Mercury in your first house is like giving you a megaphone, right? So you're going to be telling people what's on your mind, what you think, and you're going to be a little bit more direct than typical. And the first house is like what we do first thing in the morning. So there can be a sense of like focusing on getting up and doing affirmations, meditations, anything like that. Now, when you have Mercury go through your first house, like I said, your self-expression, it becomes more, it becomes louder, but it also becomes more adventurous. You become a little bit more philosophical. I would just say be mindful of how you kind of, how you present your ideas. Because Mercury, it is about your career. It is about your status or your public image, and it will come into a square with Saturn. So there can be a sense of like having a difference of opinion on home and family matters. You could be having a squabble with a neighbor. You could be having a squabble with a sibling. There could be some conflict or some delays over moving, or some challenges revolving around your communication style with family. And then you will see Mercury oppose Jupiter, and it means that there's a back and forth that you're doing with another person over a home, family, or domestic matter, right? And you are Jupiter. So you and Gemini are the signs that I'm going to tell you guys, like whether you're in relationships or not, you're going to have certain situations throughout this transit where you're going to be like, am I speaking English? And you and a partner or you and another person are be going back and forth, and you're going to be basically saying the same thing. But you're not going to be able to understand where the other person is coming from, and you're going to kind of get hit with the Saturn square. So if you're a single Sag, it's a good time to meet people, believe it or not. You might meet people, but it might be people who live further away, or it's harder to connect with them because you live further away, or there's like a home or property matter or family matter you have to deal with. For committed relationships, there can be a lot of back and forth between you and another person in regards to what you do with a home. So there could be some discrepancy over, okay, we've taken time apart. Do we sell our house? Maybe we're not on the same page about where we're living, who's moving into whose house, relationship changes which impact the house or the family in some way. So that can be another way that can kind of play out. But I'm going to tell you what I told you in your horoscope. You guys are in the driver's seat. So how you decide to communicate and talk to other people is going to really determine what's going to happen over, the next several weeks. There is a process, and I think really the process with retrograde in your first house is, how do I feel? What do I think? What can I control? What's most important to me? And how can I overcome some of the past habits or kind of patterns of what has had a tendency to take place in regards to my home and family relationships? How are you breaking the cycle? How are you changing that in some way? Be mindful with Mercury in shadow in your first house. Any major changes that you might make to your appearance, any major decisions you might make about changing relationship status, any major decisions about making changes at work, you may feel this very impulsive streak where you're like, that's it, I'm quitting my job, or I'm leaving my relationship, or I'm moving away. And like, give that time for some of that stuff to settle, work through it, really make sure that that's like a good move. And then you'll proceed forward kind of the beginning of the year, and you'll have a better idea of what direction you're gonna go in with some of these things. The card that I get for you is the Moon, okay? Which is interesting because, in the midst of the Mercury transit, Mars will be back in your 8th house. So that's Cancer. Cancer is the Moon. And it can be talking about the changes that are kind of going on in your 8th house, and like the change or the transformation of home, of family, right? Cancer, joint assets, resources. And that's going to make aspects to your 4th house. So likely there is some change coming, when it comes to your home, your family, your clan. But this can also be saying like it's time to get in deeper touch with your emotions and be recognizing what your emotions are trying to tell you, and like not reacting emotionally, like learning how to be a little bit more aware and reserved, and also like taking into consideration, how either you or relatives might be feeling. This is also subconscious or unexpected things that can come up, which I think can happen with the Mercury retrograde. We can see stuff that we've been kind of holding on to that's been festering, especially if it's in your sign, that just suddenly kind of comes out of the blue, which can be good for a sense of awareness and like epiphanies, but it can also be challenging if there are things that you have been holding back and kind of talking about. So taking time to really get in touch with that, I think, is important during this time. Good luck, Sag. We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury's transit through Sagittarius in your natal 12th house. And for you guys, this is going to be, you know, through a part of the chart that's going to deal with kind of like the more hidden, subconscious, behind the scenes, intuitive side of you. What I will say is that this is a time where like inner thoughts can become really profound. You can have some kind of like philosophical breakthrough, a spiritual breakthrough, a peak period of like heightened intuition. You can have some really significant dreams, and I would just say be cautious of getting lost in too many ideas or concepts without being grounded, okay? Mercury is also connected to your 9th as well as your 6th house. So I could see some Capricorn and Capricorn risings that are like traveling in foreign lands, trying to wrap up something in regards to like immigration, trying to get a job in another place. You are trying to work through a legal matter. Maybe this is a time where you're resting and retreating, or you're going to retreat, or you're trying to heal something, right? So that could be coming up as well. I mean, you know, Mercury will retrograde here, so it's very obvious that some of you guys will either consider to return back to school, or you'll become aware where there's been some subconscious blocks. There might be some dreams that kind of drag some things to the surface for you, make you more aware of them so you can heal them. You learn a lot about like the mind, body, spirit balance when you see a retrograde in the 12th and oppositions to stuff in the 6th. And this would be a really great time for like meditation, hypnosis, reflection, anything like that, where you can be kind of getting in touch with the subconscious to heal things. I would say international travel can be a little sticky here, so be mindful of that. And also like changes in your sleep schedule can kind of happen when you're having a Mercury retrograde in the 12th house. You can notice there could be more sleep interruptions, or maybe you're on different time zones or something like that happens, and there can be some shifts here. But yeah, lots of subconscious like things come to the surface. So I would say like keep a paper and pen handy. Take some notes when you have some of these dreams or things come up for you, because likely it can be triggering some major shifts revolving around your belief system in general. The card that I get is the 6 of Cups, which is the card of like reunion, reconnection. So it can be about soul connections. It can be about connections with people that you've been hoping to kind of reconnect with. But this can also be about like reflecting or reminiscing on like sweeter times. So that's kind of cool that you get that with the retrograde. It might mean like if you're traveling, or if you're going to school, or if you're doing some kind of training, you know, you might end up connecting with somebody who feels like, wow, I was meant to meet this person, you know, or maybe you're in a foreign land, you connect with somebody and you're like, wow, they feel very familiar to me. But this is also about, I think, having like a really sweet connection that's very innocent, and being able to kind of like really tap into that. Like I've had Mercury retrogrades in the 12th house where I've gone through photos, like I've looked at photo albums, and that might be something that you might do, especially if you're traveling or you're connecting with family in other places. You might be reviewing photos and videos and things like that, and that can be like that 6 of Cups energy that's coming up, where you're a little bit more reminiscent of that time. Good luck, Capricorn. We've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You guys are going to experience Mercury's transit through Sag in your natal 11th house. And this is going to be for you guys bringing a little bit more communication and emphasis on some of your friends, your social life, networking. It could also be like, you know, philosophical or kind of spiritual groups. I would say this is a great time for like a friend reunion. If you haven't seen people for a while, you might have people kind of hitting you up, like adding you on social media that you haven't seen in a while. It can be a time also where you might be sharing big ideas with people. You know, Mercury is connected to your 5th house of children, creativity, and self-expression, and the 8th house of what is kind of, you know, sensitive, transformative. It can also be about joint resources. And Mercury in the 11th house is going to be bringing more opportunities to connect, go to parties, socialize, and see others. What's interesting is that it's going to be about, like, I think changes that other people are going through, and like sharing good news with one another, because the oppositions to Jupiter. The only hang up is that Mercury will square Saturn, and that is going to happen a couple times, and that's your chart ruler. So there's a lot of like, oh, this thing is happening, you know, with a friend, or there is this group I'm going to join, or there is this party, or, you know, whatever. And then the square to Saturn is like, and I got to pay my dues for the network, and I got to, you know, buy them a gift, you know, and I got to, you know, I got to pay for something. And so these are good things that are worth celebrating or participating in or going to. But it does look like it's going to have a little bit of an impact on your pocketbook. And so maybe with the Mercury retrograde, there's going to be a sense of you being like, okay, you know, I'm reconnecting with some people that are bringing some kind of value into my life, or maybe they are being just as equally generous, or, you know, maybe you're becoming more aware of like who's givers and who's takers. But for the most part, I think it's positive. You might just be reevaluating which of your friendships you kind of want to hold on to, or which kind of social groups you want to continue to keep, you know, being a part of, or maybe even donating or paying services for. The square to Jupiter can also be just how much money you're spending having fun, you know? So there can be this sense of being like, there's lots of good things happening, and like people are getting married and like, you know, having parties and engagements and weddings and babies, but you're like, man, you know, this is going to make me broke. That's kind of the feeling that I get looking at that. So it's not as challenging for you guys, and watch for just, you know, the potential to be seeing things kind of changing, maybe going on with friends, and that can have an impact with you as well. You know, you end up booking a trip, or, you know, you end up springing for something, you know, for a group kind of coming together, and then you may feel the effects of, if plans change with other people, where that kind of leads you financially. Card that I get is the Two of Coins, which is hilarious because I think it very much represents this square where you're like, do I do it? Do I not do it? You know, do I say something? Do I not say something? I would just say, you know, for Aquarius and Aquarius rising, like, there are ways for you to be able to participate in socializing where you don't have to carry the weight, you know, especially if you feel like you don't have the money right now, or you don't have the resources at the moment. I look at this and I'm like, Mercury rules other people's money. If there's going to be holiday parties and gatherings and get-togethers, and maybe you're used to going to these things or hosting them, you could be like, hey, everybody bring a gift, or everybody bring a side dish or some kind of food for the party, or everybody's responsible for something. So that way you can balance everything. You don't feel like you're taking too much on. You feel like you're not doing too much at one time. Okay? Hopefully that's helpful for you. And then we've got Pisces and Pisces rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Mercury's transit into Sagittarius. It'll be going into your 10th house, where it's really good for visibility. This is great for career. This is great for communications. Communications might involve like more international connection, educational connection. It can have some kind of like philosophical side to it. And this can be a pretty optimistic time in regards to your career moves. Now, Mercury is also connected to your 7th house of relationships, as well as your 4th house of home. So when you have Mercury in the 10th house, first of all eyes are kind of on you. You know, who you're working with, what you're saying, what you're doing. Something about your private life can be public. There can be a sense of being out of the house a little bit more. And I'm really interested in the fact that, you know, Mercury will oppose Jupiter, your traditional ruler. And so it can represent where you're kind of like going back and forth, making changes between work and home. And then it's going to come into a square with Saturn in your 1st house, and kind of slightly squaring Neptune in your 1st house as well. Essentially, like, you know, as Mercury is coming through your 10th and it's going into shadow, you might start thinking about, well, is my status going to change? You know, I'm going to go from being single to being in a relationship. Am I going from being in a relationship to being single? Am I changing my career? Am I getting ready to make a big announcement about where I'm living or what I'm doing? You know, these things can happen. But you may feel with Mercury square Saturn and opposed Jupiter that bosses, parents, romantic partners, clients, business partners can be a little bit more critical of you. They're kind of checking you, you know, or they're like really optimistic. Some good things are happening at work. Some positive things are kind of opening up, and you're kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it, you know, or it's too good to be true, or like Mercury's retrograde. So, or maybe you're taking time to kind of really deliberate and go back and forth as to whether or not you're going to make a career change, or you're going to take a job. That's kind of how I see that. I would say don't be too harsh, don't be too critical, be open-minded, be optimistic. Remember that, you know, retrogrades can be times where we could return. So you may be asked to go back to an old job. You might be asked to go back to work. You might be reevaluating your career. Those of you guys who have been like hybrid, there might be some turning point decision that's like, okay, do you go back to the office full time or do you not? That kind of stuff I would expect. And I would say take this time to really reevaluate not only what you're doing work-wise, but the people that you're working with, because Mercury is connected to people and relationships as well. The card that I get is the Knight of Pentacles. Okay, so watch for a Taurus, Virgo, or a Capricorn. Although I think this could be an offer. This could be a job offer. This could be something that comes in and you're like, yeah, okay. You know, and you might write it off a little bit. But I would say, like, with the trines to the North Node in your second, it could definitely be something that could be very possible. It could be a very optimistic opportunity. It could be the beginning process of starting something new or negotiating or talking to somebody about taking a job, or some offer that comes your way that you're having to kind of consider. And this is generally something you can trust, because the Nine of Pentacles is stable and reliable. It's not something that is just kind of like, you know, just kind of fair weather. So whatever opportunities come your way, I would definitely consider them. And you'll probably see somewhere around like the time that the sun is conjuncting Mercury, that may be a time where you're making a change at work. I mean, come on, you've got Mars going retrograde in your 6th as well. So to have a retrograde in your career house and then a retrograde in your kind of daily routine office house, very likely this is going to promote some kind of opportunity for some professional change for Pisces. I hope this is helpful for you guys in better understanding this up and coming Mercury transit. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Consider sharing it on your socials and sharing it with other astrology enthusiasts. Let me know, where is Mercury retrograding in your chart? Do you natally have Mercury square Saturn, or maybe Mercury in opposition to Jupiter? I'd love to hear from you guys and hear how that's manifested, as well as some of your guys' insights and thoughts on this particular Mercury transit. I think a lot of it's going to be about the court system, the judicial system, and, you know, the rules of law that are going to be like re-examined in a very big way. And I'm really curious to see how that kind of manifests. So fingers crossed for that stuff, and also for a lot of our travel plans. Hopefully things go according to plan, but if not, we'll have to just kind of roll with the punches. Remember that this transit of Mercury in Sagittarius is all about expanding your intellectual as well as your literal horizons. So keep in mind that we're gonna have some hurdles, but don't lose sight of what the bigger picture is all about. Stay tuned, stay curious, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys very soon back on my channel. Until next time, I'll see you soon. And if you want to see any more about me or my services, click the bell button below, subscribe, and click the link in the description. Head over to my website at beyondtheveiledtarot.com. All right, guys, enjoy your Tuesday. I'll see you soon. Take care.